welcome to Frequency Finder, the SRC Music Podcast, the space where we dive into the stories, sounds and chats of the people shaping the music scene here in Northern Ireland. I'm Paddy Craig, and today we're kicking off with our very first episode with a truly special guest, Dani Larkin. Hello, and welcome to Frequency Finder. This is the Southern Regional College podcast, and we are absolutely delighted to have a special guest, our very first guest on the new podcast series. I'm just going to read this because this kind of says everything, really. Hailing from Northern Ireland, Dani Larkin is a singer-songwriter and folk artist whose music is steeped in storytelling, tradition and powerful emotion. She's been making waves across the UK and beyond, earning critical acclaim for her debut album, Notes for a Maiden Warrior, and captivating audiences at major festivals like South by Southwest, Folk Alliance and beyond. She's toured with Snow Patrol, Lisa O'Neill, Glen Hansard, Rufus Wainwright, and her signature blend of poetic lyricism and mesmering melodies. Dani is an artist who continues to push the boundaries of folk music while staying deeply connected with her roots. Welcome, Dani. Hi. So I just want to start by saying I'm a big fan. Just been listening an awful lot, in more detail now, especially since we heard that you were coming here. So I just absolutely love the work you're doing at the moment. It's just brilliant. So and obviously we're delighted to have our students here. So thank you for interrupting your tour to come and see us. You were in Dundalk last night.
I was in Dundalk last night,
Great.
yeah. Well, Paddy, thanks so much for having me, and it's such a treat to be here, and I really don't say that lightly at all. I have a little chuckle because I'm not sure I've ever described myself as from Northern Ireland, but I'll forgive you for that, Paddy. Okay. And I'm from the Armagh-Monaghan border, so I spent a lot of time. I used to work in Emerson's. I can't go in there anymore. But coming home is always so important to me, and being from this part of the north is so important, and it's always a pleasure to come back home and take a bit of time in a busy tour to sound things out.
Great, fantastic. Well, we're so delighted that you're here. So we're obviously having a bit of a deep dive into what makes Dani Larkin as far as the creative process, and so many things I want to find out about, but we should probably start at the start, right? So where were those? We always talk with the students about those spark moments, those early moments, and whenever you changed from being a consumer, a receiver, to a potential creator. Can you remember when that happened?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, in terms of magical moments, I come from a family of people who play music. Like, my granddad played music in the show bands. He still plays the trombone. I tried to learn the trombone. I can't play it. He plays it better than I can. I think that's one thing. I think also this dichotomy of, creator and consumer is something that is very much 21st century capitalism, and not how we experience music maybe, in times gone by, and hopefully into the future as well. But, I think for me, I always wrote songs, it was just something that I did. I think I wrote poetry first. So my mum tells me I gave her a poem when I was 9,
Wow.
But it took me until my 20s to really find my voice and to be able to play instruments. My uncles play music. They're in blues bands and rock bands and trad musicians as well. But almost all of that is, playing other people's work or playing repertoires of music. Whereas what I do is, write songs and sing them in a very kind of simple way. And just more and more it became apparent. Like at university, I did history and sociology, and then I did a master's in political science. But, I couldn't be without music, and that's just it.
It's just your language.
That's just it. And, more and more I'm like, I could be doing anything in the world, but there is no other pathway for me anymore. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody sitting here, if anybody feels that way, but, it's something that gives so much. It asks so much. but it gives a lot as well.
Sure.
Does that answer your question, or am I just blethering?
I mean, no, not at all. Because it's kind of, we have these conversations all the time, you know, and everybody in this room's a writer, so everybody has an opportunity to write. Some have been writing for quite a while and are developing that skill, and some have hit it for the first time. And I think it's always helpful, you know, just hearing from somebody who has been doing it for a while, and I suppose when you're talking about that part of you has always been there, even though that your studies and interests may have taken you down a different pathway. You've always done it with the accompaniment of an instrument. What was can you remember the first time you played in front of somebody that was your song, that was the kind of the first risk that you took in that moment? Do you remember
It's a great question. Funny, the thing that comes to mind, which is a little bit different, is me singing Flying Without Wings by Westlife.
Okay.
When I was like
Fair
14,
enough.
which is like hugely controversial in the room, apparently. But I think that for me was a risk moment of like, even if we shared songs in a family or as a friendship group, there are always folk songs or traditional songs, and to do something different, that was a risk.
Right.
I suppose with that first risk then came the other risks. If I ever meet anyone from Westlife, I won't be able to cope. But, you know, and like, I'm not a boy band pop music fan now, but I certainly was when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And then I started doing open mics, and that was a big thing.
Okay,
And I was chatting to Matt about that earlier as well, of like, I don't know anyone that particularly wants to write their songs to have them played in front of drunk people who are loud and many other things besides. But there's a real skill in that. We have to go through that in order to develop our craft and our art and be able to fully believe in what we're doing on stage. So all of that is essential. So that was another point of vulnerability. And most people at open mics did cover songs. So they played other people's music. But I didn't. I always played my own. And if I did do covers, they were covers that I wanted to do. So necessarily not ones that other people knew either, you know, probably quite obscure artists that I probably could have just been singing my own songs and people wouldn't have known. And I suppose from there, I mean, part of that conversation is about community as well. So I developed a community of people in doing open mics, and that was really important. And then that led to doing gigs, you know. And then things just keep on going.
From there.
Yeah.
It's an unusual thing, isn't it, to enter into that world where you're on your own, you know. And I'm wondering, you're talking about the music that was surrounded you from a younger age, that was kind of part of, you know, those would have been all of the information you would have gotten at that time, and I guess probably the normality of music for you was just, that's just what happened in the
For
family.
sure. I mean, I think the thing is, and families are many, many things, but, you know, it's kind of how we communicated or how we met. You know, we met each other in music, and I'm still, you know, my granny and granda were at the gig in Dundalk last night. You know, it's still very much a part of that. And even though I'm doing something that's very maybe different from what I was surrounded by, it's still music. Like, music is the magic. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's more, how do you communicate and share that with people, you know?
Such an important part, that resilience, pushing through those early gigs where everybody was chatting in the background, and to have your voice heard. And what made you come back after the first gig?
That is a good question, Paddy. You know, I think it's just a belief that this is who I am and it's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Cool.
And I really believe in the work, and I really believe in the songs. And, you know, that has to come first above everything else. It doesn't matter about what people think or say or feel. Actually, if I am committed to my craft and to being this way in my work, then everything else will follow, you know.
Brilliant.
And that has to be resolute, no matter what it is, you know. no matter what the obstacle might be. It might be someone drunk in the room.
Yeah.
It could be a reviewer who doesn't like your music. It might be someone that you've worked with before, and you no longer work with. All of those, doubts or fears or voices will come in different ways at different times. But for me, if the commitment to the work is there, then that's the thing that's unwavering,
Yeah, brilliant. That's pretty amazing. The resilience in that is phenomenal. I mean, there's a lot of, talk to many musicians and they find that part quite difficult. The questioning themselves or the work that they do. And but it sounds to me that you had made a decision quite early on that this is what you're going to do, no matter what. That self-belief, which is phenomenal. And I think to me, what I also hear is there's a lot of that risk taker. That risk taking probably started from when you were probably knee high to a grasshopper, I would imagine. It's your parents' concern, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I think I feel very fortunate to still have my grandparents on the planet and also have a really beautiful relationship with them. And my granny said to me last night, she was like, when you were doing that Bloodthirsty song, I was just looking at you really going for it, and I just imagined you, hitting your head off the cot when you were a child. And I was like, you can play all over the world, you can play with many big artists, you can sell out whatever, but actually those are the moments that you're seen on stage or that mean a lot more. And I don't feel so much as it's taken a risk as to like pushing through the boundary of what is possible.
Okay. Sure. That's probably a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, it's just how I feel about it, but I think there are many risks associated with that, especially in an age of streaming. And the music industry as it currently is,
Yeah, there's a whole subject area right there, isn't there? For sure. I think maybe before we get into that, because I do want to have a wee chat with you about that. I suppose for me the next steps are, because we've recently been talking to some people that analysis of the industry or the thought that we're on a kind of a ladder of some shape or form as to in relation to where we are in the scale of the DIY musician, the hobbyists, through to the superstars, the Beyoncés of the world and the rest. And I think whenever it's getting to each of those steps, and you probably don't look upon that way, but whenever you turn around and realize, like for example, you turned around and realized that you were on the other side of the world on stage supporting Snow Patrol and thinking to yourself, have you ever had that, how did I get here? That thought.
How did I get here? Yes and no. I'm really grateful for what I do, to be able to, do what I do. I'm very grateful for that. But I also absolutely deserve every step of the way because we work so hard as musicians and writers. Everyone in this room will know that, whether that's in the craft of the work and perfecting a sound or a tone or voice or whatever that might be, but also like in overcoming those doubts or fears. So it's about being able to step into those moments when they arrive and go, this is what, that working for 3 months every single day is for. And yes, it's amazing. How did I get here? And where do we go next? How do we open those worlds out a bit? And I mean, playing with Snow Patrol is amazing. Like the main gig I did with them was in London at the London Palladium, and it was just, it was 2021. Is that true? Yes, because I actually still had a full-time job at the time, and we were coming out of the pandemic, and it was a real moment of euphoria because we hadn't seen any live music for a year and a half, and I'd released the record, and I hadn't been able to gig it or anything like that. So then all of a sudden you're like sitting in your bedroom writing these songs, not talking to anybody, and then you're on stage in front of 5,000 people. And
Wow.
it was our incredible time, and more to come.
Very strange time, that whole time period where everybody was in lockdown, and many writers that I've spoken to actually cherished that time because it was a time where they just had permission just to get the head down and write and reflect How was it for you?
Yeah, it was a bit of a coming out moment for me in lots of different ways. It was like, because I released my record in June 2021, and I was working full time at the time, that was kind of my breakthrough as an artist from, working. I was working in folklore, so I'm not maybe completely removed, but, I was kind of in the midst of all of that planning and sharing that work. And that was the time I was like, I'm either going to do this or I'm not.
Okay.
Again, there are just so many times where there's forks in the road where you can be like, am I going to pursue this dream or this work, or am I going to go in a different direction? And I chose that. And I mean, having toured, pretty much consistently for the next 3 years after, I can definitely see the value in taking at least a year to write and reflect, and because there's such an emphasis on touring and the need for touring, which is really true, and I love it, but it's also a very exhausting element of the work. So how do you take care of yourself within that? For me, I really enjoy writing my own songs and singing them, but I know a lot of people then end up getting songwriters to write their songs as artists because they don't have the energy to put back into that practice. So, I think there's so many ways to do it. There's not a one size fits all, and it's just more about what do you enjoy doing within that. Yeah. Maybe working with other people if, you're on the road a lot. It's infinite possibilities, really,
So on that, for your flow, for your, whenever you're creating, do you have a particular approach that you use? Is there kind of a get in the zone moment, or tell us a little bit about that?
I think at this point, maybe this sounds very cheesy, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It's almost a continuous zone moment, and I think that's something that's what I'm grateful for, because, if I'm sitting in the house, it's a second nature. It's almost first nature to pick up an instrument. And that's kind of how that has always been for me. Okay. But what has maybe developed or changed in the past few years is what I then do with that, what I do with that voice note. And I'm I have a lot of lovely toys and instruments here, which I'm very excited about. But, this is all very new, as in all of this stuff, I've got in the last year, so I've been playing music, pursuing it for 10 years, and it's now only in the 11th year that I have had the capacity or resources or found the funding to get what's in front of me. And I really think, for me, it always starts with a voice note on my phone, and it's guitar and vocal. That's what it comes back to. Okay. So we don't need all of the fancy equipment or any of it. It's just more, am I listening to that voice? What does it say? And try not to attach anything else to it. So be like, is this going to be a good song? Is it going to be on Radio 6? Is it going to lead me on tour with, This Is the Kit, who's one of my favourite bands? Or, it's more just like when that comes along, just follow that little noodle on guitar, or that moment on piano, or that voice, whatever it is, it's just following it. And I find that if I keep doing that, then the songs keep arriving, and then they'll develop into something like, I actually don't know what I have on here, so this could be really, really funny, or really, really bad. But this is an instrument. It's called an OP1 by Teenage Engineering, and the last record that I made, which will be out at some point in the future, the person in the studio had one of these, and so it's on some of the record, but also it's pretty much a DAW in a box that you can take with you anywhere, and then has strings. So there's all loads of lovely synths that you can make magic things happen with, but then you also have terrible drum sounds because I have the synth at the same time, but you can punch in all of those and a lovely delay. You can punch in all of those like drum sounds or any of those little. I find this a very creative tool because once I have the voice note, I can either play it into this because there's an onboard mic. There's like a 4-track recorder on it, so you can layer all of your sounds up, and then within an hour you can have a fully produced song ready to go. And the reason I love it is because it fits in a bag.
Of course.
Right. So when I'm touring, like you said, during the pandemic, so many people they were so grateful for the time to write. Whereas this tool, for me, when I'm on the road, I can be sitting having a coffee, put my headphones in.
And away you go.
And away I go, and I don't have to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
So things like that for me have changed maybe slightly the speed of which I finish a song or work in a song when I'm touring or on the move. But it's also, for me, I'm a multi-instrumentalist, and really, I wouldn't say I limited myself to acoustic instruments for years, but that just seemed to be what was around.
Okay.
Whereas now, for me, I'm able to use those acoustic instruments as starting points, but then put in a brass section using this, or a string section using that. And it also takes a bit of time out of when I'm in the studio. I'm working on a record like the last record. I finished it in 10 days, and it meant because I had a lot of preparation done already.
Right.
I was like, yes, I know I want to follow this idea, or
Yes.
there's a gap in that space. And what this does is it firstly allows me to get off a screen, which as a neurodivergent person, I really love. And it gets me into my ears, which I think is really important.
Right.
And then secondly, it gives me something like a template to work from. And it can be like, okay, well, do I need an orchestra? Okay, well, who can I ask? Who will give me an orchestra? Or do I need a string ensemble? Or can I achieve that same sound with 3 musicians and mic in the room slightly differently?
Okay.
So in terms of the nuts and bolts of songwriting, that hasn't changed. But in terms of my production techniques, and getting to that finished song or record, that's definitely developed with the likes of these kinds of tools.
Okay, because there's always that moment, isn't there? The question, am I finished? Is it done? Because I hear that a lot too.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's just trust.
Okay.
That's, for me. And I think as well, that's one of the wonderful things about completely, like if I could, I would sit with a guitar and write 5 or 6 songs a day, every day for the rest of my life and do nothing else.
Right.
That would be me at my happiest. And unfortunately, I have to do things like send emails, and
Put petrol in the car.
and put exactly and walk the dog and all of those things. But I think developing that practice where the song, at least the bare bones of it, whether that is guitar and vocal or synth or sample or whatever that is, to keep doing that and to do it every day. The rest will come, and I know for me, and then I'll know when I'm finished as well, because ultimately you're like, it's either, oh, that's completely done, or, oh, I'm not sure about that, and then I take a step back and I might revisit it another time.
Okay.
And
do you have sounding boards for at any stage the cross? Do you use the dog to give you some feedback, or people around you, other musicians, producers?
That's a really good question. Not at the creative stage.
Okay.
I'm a solo artist. I'll take a band with me on occasion, but it is a very solo endeavor. I wouldn't say that's necessarily always by choice, but it's just how it happened.
Okay.
And then the friends of mine that are also kind of solo artists or musicians, we're all in a similar kind of boat. So there'll be people that I'll maybe be like, it'll come maybe in the mixing part of a record, or, if there's something I'm not sure of, there's like 4 or 5 people that I really trust, and I'll ask them a question, but also I don't necessarily take on board their answer either.
Okay. Just by asking it.
It's just by asking, you're like, is this the thought? Or
yes.
I'm not sure. But a lot of it is self-reflective practice. But I think community is so important and so needed in music, both, in terms of a creative aspect and also in terms of when you're gigging or touring or making bodies of work, you know. We need people, we need each other, and we need creative people as well.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
Absolutely, for sure. So how the relationship with your audience? We've got you know we're in a very well. I'm not sure how you feel about this the whole genre conversation. You know, we have the folk artist Dani Larkin, and then to me you're genre busting. You're kind of pushing out. It feels to me from listening to your body of work that I've heard so far that you're continually pressing across that. How do you feel about that?
I feel great. In the short, I think for me, I have never thought of myself as a folk artist. Every record is going to be different.
Okay.
However, genres like labels really help people to define or identify in certain ways.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely something useful in that, but it also can feel like, in an industry sense, there's a massive conversation around, okay, you're a folk artist, that means you can only play folk festivals. So you're limiting your audience in terms of singer-songwriter or pop or country or mainstream. And, for me, it's about making music that connects with people regardless of, like, whether you like country music or Westlife.
Yeah.
Shock horror. And, I was chatting to another manager recently of a friend of mine, and he said, what we wanted to do with this artist was, the record is the project, the artist isn't the project. And what they meant by that was so often we see one artist and we put them in that genre, and that is almost only the kind of music that they'll make album after album.
Yeah.
Whereas, even 10, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. Or like, you listen to any music, any analog records, every single one of them is different. Whereas I think now that maybe the culture of genre has almost taken over what it means to be an artist in a sense, because with some records, it kind of almost feels like the same sound throughout. Whereas even for me, in any upcoming bodies of work that might be floating around, it is definitely those elements knit a record together, but not every song or not every sound is the same. Okay. And that's a personal choice as well. Like every artist is different in that. I know that for me, folk music is where I came from in terms of family. But even then, it wasn't prescriptive. It wasn't traditional singing. It was just folk as in of the people. Yeah. And I think, there's a whole realm of us like Lankum and John Francis Flynn and Joshua Burnside and, all of who I, know, although we're in quite different, maybe genres are placed in different ways. We're all a bit genreless, we're pushing what it means to be folk, what it means to be trad, what it means to be experimental, what it means to be a singer-songwriter. And it's just trusting your voice, you know? And in terms of how that relates to audience, like I really believe that if you can trust yourself and share your work from that perspective, nothing else actually matters. It might feel like it does, and certainly some days to me it feels like it does. Yeah. But it doesn't, know?
Yeah. So the song, as far as the conversation about serving the song, is that the momentum then? Is it whatever you hear in that moment, is it steered by your decision making in that specific moment for that song, and therefore whatever instrumentation you explore is all about just curiosity then, is it? Or
100%. And curiosity is such a beautiful way to describe it, because I never want to go in with a preconceived idea, especially when it comes to my work, right? So if someone gave me a commission, for example, and it had to be written to brief, then you have to think in a maybe slightly different way or world, or am I communicating this line of text or narrative? Is it in this style? Does it need to be faster? Then those questions come in. But when it comes to my work, then it is curiosity and playfulness, because what else is there? And sometimes I probably have like 200 voice notes on my phone that I've yet to go back and listen to and
Yes.
sound out. And some of those songs will just be for me.
Yeah.
But then others will, have lives of their own, I suppose. Yeah.
And is that decision making when you come to that point, whether you're gonna, it's not for sharing yet, or maybe sharing at all? Where do you stand in the whole world of subject matter being the message? This message needs to land with people at this moment in time.
Yeah, I really feel like if it feels good to me, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Okay, that's a good filter.
And that,
Yeah.
because if I go with anything else, like, for example, there are songs that I've written that I could have released last year that would have really made sense to what's going on in the world.
Okay.
But for me, things weren't lining up. And maybe we can talk about release strategy if people want to, like, I'm keenly aware, I don't know if you're all songwriters or you want to release music or you're in bands or you want to work in music production. So we can sound any of those things out. But, I needed a few other stars to align before I wanted to release my work.
Okay.
And that was just it. Especially in an age where things are so transient and can disappear so quickly, I want to give my work the best platform it can possibly have to reach people. And that's not just about social media. It's about me feeling ready to release it and planning, months in advance, whether or not there's a possibility to work with a label or to work with someone in radio or PR, or am I going to be writing all of those emails? Because if I'm writing them, then I'm going to need to take time out of other work. So all of those thought processes, once the song is ready,
yes,
then I very rarely release it, within a month or 3 months. It's more about planning. Now, perhaps if I had a wider team, that would be different. But there's no rush.
Okay.
There's no rush. Because once it's out there, it's out there. And it's not that it disappears, because it will always be there. But in an age of consumerist, productivity around how we create,
yes,
then it's almost like, well, what's the next record? And you're like, well, I just spent 3 months and my undying soul to get that record out,
And all of that awareness, I suppose, that's, there's over 120,000 songs released every day. And how does your work that you've put an enormous amount of time in, when is the right time for that to come out, that you're happy with? And I guess also that just leads us into, I suppose, into your strategy with that. And taking that care. So you've got to wear multiple hats. So you've got to take off the creative hat and say, okay, products, creative, if you can use that term. Yeah. Some people don't like that. Maybe the song is written, and now I value this, so therefore, how do I take this to market in the most effective way that works for you? Yeah,
and that's it. It's also, it's part business, part creativity. Depending on what you want to do and how you want to do it, certainly if you want to release music commercially and have it as your full-time work, then you have to really be able to balance that.
Yeah.
Even when you have a team, I had a manager for 2 years, and that in many ways was some things were very easy, but also within that, some things were very challenging.
Okay.
Whereas now I have a booking agent for Ireland, one in Australia, France and Belgium, and then contacts with promoters and festivals throughout the UK and North America. But I don't really have a team. So what that means is, when someone emails, oh, hi, Dani, I want you to do an interview, it's like, oh, hi, it's actually just me here. This is really awkward. Yeah. You kind of have to move between that until you have a team in place. And that's the same with releasing music. I finished my record last August, mastered, finished. Okay. But I spent a long time trying to find a home for that, or who I would want to work with on that record. Okay. Because I know that there's a certain standard of work that I want to meet, that my songs are worthy of radio play on, Radio 6 and tours. So I want to give them that same amount of care and energy in the release that I do. So I researched who does the PR for my favorite bands, and then I hired those people to do my PR.
Great.
Which yes costs a lot of money, but the way I kind of think of it is, well, this is the upfront cost that's going to, pay for my next 2 years of work and potentially a new record and reaching X amount of, whatever the goals are.
Sure.
Really.
So you're investing in yourself and for that long-term goal. So total commitment.
Yeah, and I have to, and again, it comes back to the music. If I believe in the music, then I'll push it as far as I can, and hopefully other people will enjoy it too.
Cool. Well, I think they already are, for sure. Speaking of which, is this a good time to ask you to
do some things?
Play a song or something that you're interested in at the moment?
I suppose it's good to maybe get a feel of the room. Are you writers? If you're writers, put your hands up. Okay, we're writers. And I suppose that means lots of different things, but maybe I can do some funny things here that might make a wee bit of sense. So, I mean, it's also really important to say that, I don't know any music theory. All of this is literally by ear or what feels good. I'm going to take these off. I can also, if anybody wants to come and have a chat about the pedal board, come and do that. This is what will I do for you? This is an example of I suppose there we go. That idea of folk music but taking it to another realm. So I'll give you a little snippet of it because I think we'll have a performance in a little while. And this snippet or sound recording was a field recording that I took in Palestine in 2016 when I was there. And I just came across it in when I was looking through loads of files on my computer, and I was like, I wonder would that work under that song? And, dragged it into the DAW, and I was like, it really does. And then sent it to the mix engineer, and I was like, can you just make this work? Which he did, but then it kind of, we... I'll do a full snippet of it, but basically what's happening is I have, this took me a very long time to find actually, I have a loop pedal that I can put WAV files on. So I really don't like using laptops as part of a live setup. I know that lots of people do, and kind of each to their own, but for me it's really important not to have screens in that way on stage. I could have put the WAV file onto the OP1 and ran it out, but I wanted control over it through a foot pedal. So I found that Boss, they do lots of really great pedals. Yeah. This one cost me £60. It means I can pretty much, oh great, now we have a wee bit of magic here. I got it secondhand. Almost everything that I own is secondhand, actually, other than this guitar. And it just meant, okay, this completely transforms my sound of my set because I can bring in those files. There's a memory bank on there that I can choose which file to which song. And that can be anything from a backing track or a drum beat or whatever. And I find that a really seamless integration. In terms of the pedal board, I'm running a banjo through a 3-splitter pedal. and then a tuner pedal, and then out again. But I have one signal, basically the one banjo signal that's dry, and then one banjo signal that's wet. And on the wet signal, it just means we can add things like this really shimmery, a really shimmery reverb that, like, for me, it's not about blasting everyone out, all sound up front all the time, but it's in those subtleties and how do you build that throughout a song. So you'll see it later as well, but especially this little mood bliss pedal has a loop on it, so it's constantly recording. And then it will manipulate the sound to 3 times the speed, which is like, which just really, it changes. And this is all very new for me. Like, this is the first tour that I'm using these pedals on as well. It completely changes the sound, the texture, the color.
Sure.
But it also, what it does is it communicates what's going on in my head all of the time, right? And I didn't know until I went in to make the last record that you didn't have to carry an amp everywhere, that you could just get an amp simulator pedal.
Yeah.
That's a big game changer. Because this guitar, which I will talk about because it's very magic to me, has a humbucker P90 pickup in it, and then an acoustic pickup that has 3 mics and a piezo on the inside. So this guitar has 2 channels, and I run the electric channel through a Fender 65 Deluxe Reverb simulator pedal. So it's like, it just adds a whole other character to the sound. And that's also how I think about the set, because for me, there's almost like a darkness to light in most of my work or songs. There's a very big, aggressive, angry sound in some ways. And then there's also softness and tenderness and vulnerability. And, how do you communicate that breadth of emotion? When you're live on stage as one person as opposed to in a studio. And I find this setup, although it's quite complicated, really does that. And I'll give you a wee go on this guitar very briefly, and I'll show you what I mean as well, because you'll get a sense of it with the performance. And I suppose there's so many other ways to do it as well. This is just my way, right? So let's see here. We're really all tangled up. I'm not used to sitting down and having such luxuries. So I'll give you you can hear what the acoustic signal just sounds like. Hopefully. Yeah. And we can punch in electric. Which is really like, you can work out the tone later, but it is quite a big sound for an acoustic instrument. And then, you'll see this song, or you'll hear this song later, so you'll get a sense of what it's like fully, but it's choosing what moments of the song then to add effects in or take them out and making that a very gentle integration. And that's how I've spent most of the last 6 months. But with this, it's the same. That was too much.
Okay, it's going somewhere.
That was big. That was a lot of feedback, and I'm not sure how we got there, which is also why we have sound checks, right?
Yeah.
But it can get pretty. I can develop it pretty big, pretty fast, but it's also not an over-reliance on those
Sure.
technical elements. Again, for me, it's back
Yeah.
to the song.
Yeah.
And that's different for everyone, right? You might want to, you know, you're okay, it's all right. It's just these...
Do you have a name?
Do I have a name?
for your
No,
guitar?
this is still very new,
Okay.
so we don't have a name.
Do you name your instruments?
I usually do,
Okay.
but that banjo also doesn't have a name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people do, some people don't.
I do, yeah. I mean, this guitar. The only thing I said, I'm very fortunate to have it built for me. It was funded by the Arts Council. I could never afford to do that, but the only thing that I said to the luthier was, I want to be able to play electric and acoustic, and I want a long enough neck so I can tune it down to open D and still have the length. And I don't want it to be a cutaway because I don't like how... Maybe it's very specific, actually.
That's quite the brief, right?
Yeah. But like, for someone like Frank, you know, this is... And I wanted it to be as light as possible because I have quite... like pain flare-ups in my neck from constantly carrying gear. So taking care of myself in that way is really important. So this is a very light guitar, but with like maximum sound. And one of Frank's things is that he does is he makes a hole in the side of the guitar. So you'll see later, like, I was like, what am I going to do with this? Like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
But now I've incorporated that into my playing style, where at the end of one of my songs, I'll sing into that so that the effects that are coming through the wet signal and through my acoustic mics are in that realm. So it's good when it works.
Yeah, so the guitar becomes a microphone.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's the thing, like, that's a very luxurious, you know, way to do it. But like, even in any of my other guitars, like I have another guitar in the car that, like, this guitar last night, the string broke halfway through a set. It fell off the stand. Like, it was all really happening. And I had another guitar with me that I was going to play one song on. And I bought that for like $150 in New York 7 years ago. And I ended up playing the rest of the set on that guitar. But that guitar, the pickup in it also has a mic. So I really enjoy micing my instruments in that way rather than having straight electrical signals, because I feel like it's more alive. Again, it's a personal choice, but it just means you can do, you know, I used to play a lot of percussive guitar and a lot of instrumental guitar, so I wanted to incorporate all of those elements. And I mean, those pickups alone are also quite expensive. They're like 100 to 150 pounds, so it takes a bit of time and energy and commitment, but I just don't, I never want the technology to hold me back or people back. Like, yeah, it would be great to have all the money in the world to buy all the things. But it's not, I don't think it makes you a better writer. No. You know? No.
But it's, again, it has to come back to, it's a tool to help serve the song. It's got to give you an added, I mean, atmosphere always seems to me a very important part of your work. From what I hear, you know, everything that you establish an environment almost. I kind of, you know, you get that established feeling. So it must be quite exciting for you to have all of these extra colours to play with.
Bells and whistles, yeah. I think it is. You know, for me, making music is almost a sacred, maybe doesn't feel like quite the right word, but it's as close as to what I have to anything that is beyond the human realm. And
purity.
Yeah, and I, you know, in order for me to give my best performance, I want to feel like I'm walking into an environment that can hold that. And that's down to what I do. It's down to what the engineers on the night do, what happened that day, whether I had butter with my scrambled eggs in the morning. You know, there's so many things that go into that. But as soon as I step onto that stage, no matter what happens, I'm there and I'm present. You know, and it has to be that way. And it also then people leave feeling like something has happened. You know, an audience then leaves feeling like, whoa, what just happened in that room?
There was an event.
Exactly. I'm different now, whether it's good different or bad different. It's a change has occurred. And that for me is transformative, and music does that. You know? And like, if I hadn't done all of those open mics playing in front of drunk people,
Yes.
I wouldn't have developed the skills to be able to create that presence
Yes.
on stage, you know?
And how much of that, whenever you're in that moment on the stage, how much of that do you continue to push and explore mid song or mid set, or how does that flow for you?
Yeah, I spend a great deal of time thinking about my set beforehand, even if
Okay.
it's solo.
Okay.
In terms of not only song placement of like how people might feel, but how the sonic elements knit together
Yeah.
and what the storytelling is.
Mm-hmm.
So the map is always there, but that is only ever a map. A set list is only ever a map.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not feeling one song, or if for whatever reason my confidence has been knocked on stage, then I might go and do something different, or
Okay.
I might not chat as much, or
Okay.
all of that's very much,
Sure.
you know, changeable. But it also depends on the audience.
Sure.
If they're really there
gonna
for
say,
it, then you
absolutely.
can really push and pull the boundaries. Or like, you know, I remember I did a festival in Australia, just last year, maybe the year before, and it's called Port Fairy Folk Festival, and it's like 10,000 people in a tent. And I got them all to sing one of my songs back to me. And I was like, it didn't occur to me at the time that would have been a strange thing to do.
Right.
And then when I came off, my manager at the time was like, whoa. And I was like, oh, that's just felt like the right thing to
Yeah.
do. So,
Yeah.
and that only comes with practice, or like sometimes it goes really wrong, like that
Sure.
feedback there
Yeah.
5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you don't take those chances, then you also won't know. And I feel like you won't know the boundaries of your work, or what feels comfortable, or what direction to go in, you know?
And in those moments, just to be able to let go of it and just move
Yeah.
on as that's just something that happened, shrug it off.
Yeah. Well, it's like, oh shit, my G string has broken the guitar, and I like that is the string that I use all the time.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
pick up another
Yeah.
guitar and look at it and go, oh, what am I
What do I do now?
what am I gonna do? You know?
Yeah.
And that all comes with practice and
Sure.
time,
Of course.
you know?
Of course. So, what about, or do you spend with that preparedness you were talking about earlier about having things recorded? Have you got an outline for the future in the next 6 months or the next year? How far forward do you look at the moment?
I think, and people always say this, you need to have like a 5-year plan or a direction of where you want to go.
Okay.
I find plans and time and the future are really difficult concepts.
Okay.
But I do have a plan, and I need to think about it. You know, sometimes I'm really like, okay, well, it's kind of just shifting that timeline from like, I've written this song, okay, I'm going to put it out. You know, it's all patterns of behavior. So maybe when I was doing open mics, if I was recording and releasing music, I might have just been like, I've written this song, I'm going to put it out. Okay, well, what does that mean? Maybe find a distributor to put it on Spotify.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what, you know, is that where it ends? Am I going to email people in radio, you know?
Yeah.
So how many times do I put a song up on Spotify without telling anyone else about it? Does it take for me to understand that, okay,
Yeah.
I need to do more here around this release for people to hear the music?
Yes.
So that's one aspect. And then each time you do that, it gets slightly bigger, you know? So it's like, okay, well, for example, I'm on this Irish tour now. Like, we live on such a small island, and it's amazing, and I love it, and I love living here. But you can only really tour here once a year.
Yeah.
So then as a gigging musician, you have to go, okay, well, where's the next place I can gig in between times? And then, you know, that's throughout the UK. Okay, well, then I can maybe gig there once a year as well. So then where's my next touring route?
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. So you have
is
to
it
think that.
Europe or whatever? So, you know, and then you maybe have 4 tours a year, and okay, that's great, but like, is that making you enough money, or is that, are you able to release music alongside that?
Yeah.
So then you have to go, well, if I'm selling out venues at 20 people a venue, as an example now, then next year I want to be selling out those venues at 40 people. And the year after that, I want to be selling them out at 100 people.
Yeah.
And the year after that, I want to be doing arenas, or
Yes.
whatever your goal is, the vision,
Yeah.
the dream and the vision has to be there. And then you find a way to make the plans work
Sure.
around it, you know?
Sure. but you've got to have the product first. You've got to
Yeah,
have
and
the
it doesn't.
song.
If you don't have music,
Yeah.
none of it will work.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
You know, and I
absolutely.
think music is that wonderful way of like. It's very easy in this industry to like forget that actually the people that make the music are the important ones, and we wouldn't have an industry
The
without
most
them,
important.
without us. You know,
Absolutely.
so it's remembering that and our own self-worth within that, and you know, putting that forward first.
Yes.
Uh,
Getting that right first.
yeah, and whether that's your voice, and that might change over time.
Sure.
It certainly will.
Sure.
But it's just coming back to that and then deciding where you want to go after the fact.
Sure. Well, I'm excited to think about what you're going to come up with next. You know, you've got all of these wonderful new toys to play with, and the
Me
flow
too.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll see a wee bit of it now anyway,
Sure.
and get a snippet of it. And if there are any questions, or
Yeah, I
I
was
realise
just
we've
gonna
just been
say,
talking at you for
This is a good time
wee
to
while.
open it up to the floors. Anybody any questions?
yeah.
Jody, to the back there.
Hi.
I'm Judy. I'm also from the Armagh border.
Yes, Judy.
Basically, I had a question. It's more about bridging the gap between. So, I'm a singer-songwriter. I've just recently released my first single.
Congratulations.
But as you know, the communities we come from, quite tight-knit, quite small circles. You can release it and get a good feedback from your local community, but I'm basically just looking up. Could you offer me any advice about bridging that gap between them becoming more established, going on the streaming services, creating your kind of profile? I'm just I have a wee bit of misdirection at the moment, so if
Yeah.
you could offer me any advice, that
Yeah.
would be great.
Thank you for your question, and for standing up to ask it. So now I know what you look like. And I think, you know, as much as I'm an introvert as well, it's really important any opportunity that we get at these events to say hello. Like, we're all collaborators in the room. I don't know any artist that doesn't consider other artists or writers someone to collaborate with. Yeah, really, really get it. It can be really challenging to break out of that, like, okay, I've done this, maybe didn't get what I expected out of it. How do I change that? You know, what do I need to do? And I suppose it really depends on what you've done so far. But one thing, like a few things I would say is like, okay, maybe, yes, one single's good, but a body of work is almost a lot easier for everyone, whether they're reviewers or radio people or gig bookers or promoters, to get behind. So you might have that one song, but then take your time and write another two that you want to release at the same time and have your lead single from that, whether that's an EP or an album. Connect with as many people as possible, either in terms of doing your artwork or be like, look, are you happy to collaborate with me on doing this artwork, whether that's photos or a drawing or whatever, and I'm happy to write a song for you, or do that exchange, because that grows your community almost instantly. Getting a distributor, there's lots of distribution services that will distribute your music to Spotify and X, Y, and Z. I think that's really essential if you want to develop a profile, because whether we like it or not, Spotify, my preference is Tidal, but Spotify and Apple really have the monopoly on how we send people our music. So, you know, Amuse is a distributor that you can pay £5 a month for uploading unlimited songs. So yes, there is a bit of a trade-off or an investment, but then your music is already up there and you can select what day it comes out. And it also gives you an understanding of what it takes to distribute and release music. There's lots of other distributors, that's just one. And then I think the thing is, you know, social media, I don't particularly enjoy it, but it is a way of connecting with people, and people will visit your profile based on that. So it's thinking, okay, well, if I'm releasing this single, what is the timeline? Do I want to tell people about it a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance? If I'm telling people about it 2 weeks in advance, have I created enough social media content to keep talking about that for 2 weeks? Or, you know, is it because now we live, like when I put out the first record, you would nearly tell people a month in advance that you were releasing your single, and that was the lead-in time. Whereas now you tell people a week in advance, and you're asking, you know, what is the ask? Are you asking them to pre-save the single? Are you asking them to come to a gig? It's maybe thinking about all of those things, which is definitely overwhelming at times, but just work on one corner of it. You know, if you haven't put your music on Spotify, then make that the next goal for your next release. If you haven't emailed anyone on radio, then make that your next goal. And like so many people that I know, like I spent a month looking up all of the email addresses for all of the people in BBC and listening to all of their programs to be like, okay, where does my new single, because it's slightly different, which came out last week and you should all listen to, where does that fit? You know, where does it? It's not folk music, but it's pushing that boundary into a more singer-songwriter pop element. So for me, that sits in BBC Radio 6. So I found those emails online and I emailed them. Now I didn't get a response because most of the time you won't. But if your name comes up enough, then that's when momentum starts to gather. And it's just having belief in that to be like, I am doing everything that I can to give this the best chance. And you know, you will be rejected and it will be hard to break out of those spaces, but you will do it. I think I really ranted at you, Jodie. Is that helpful? Yeah.
That's good.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So how did you find your song as a singer-songwriter? Do you ever find it a challenge to stay on the lines of a particular genre when writing music?
Yeah. Good questions. What's your name? Laura. Hi. It takes a really long time to develop sound, right? And I think it's a lot easier to think of it as in not one sound is definitive or like, thank you.
Sorry. Really annoying me.
Not one sound is the definite sound. You know, that can change. Like, I only bought my first amp before Christmas. And now I'm like, whoa, what do amps do? Like, how do I integrate that into my set? Whereas before I was like playing strictly acoustic instruments. I think the thing is to be like, what do I want to express and what are the tools that I have available to me to express that? So whether or not that is an acoustic guitar on its own or it's all of this stuff, I just want to be able to communicate, okay, this is a really tender moment in this song, so do I play lightly or do I have no effects on this part, or on this part I want to create a feeling that's a bit more urgent. So, you know, if I have only the guitar, am I strumming more heavier on it? And those might seem like all very simple things, but actually in live performance and then in a studio setting, all of that makes such a huge difference. And it just takes time, right? Wish there was an easier short answer for that. And I think it's similar to genre. I mean, maybe other people might think differently, but, you know, for me, it's all about the song. There are songs that I've written that I wouldn't release under Dani Larkin because I don't feel they fit within that. But like, I only know that once they're written, you know? And you just write. It's like write and keep writing, and you'll know that yourself as you come along and you go, okay, this fits within this record. Whereas like, I wrote a song the other day and in my head I was like, oh, that's for record number 5. Now I have no idea what record number 5 is or like what it's going to be, but I feel like the feeling is that's not for right now. It's not even for the next record. So where does that fit? Like, I was driving home from my friend's house the other evening. There's an artist that I listen to. They're called Alabaster de Plume, based in London, and is a jazz saxophonist, and I love their work. And by the time I'd finished the drive home, I decided I was going to learn clarinet. I had the name of my jazz album, and I had all 11 tracks, the name of them. Now I have no idea what the music is going to be, but I know that I'll release a jazz album in 3 to 5 years' time, you know. And I suppose that only comes after 10 years of like making a lot of mistakes and, you know, figuring things out. And for me, also really helpful to think of it as bodies of work. You know, those songs might not necessarily make sense all together on one record, but if you take them apart and put them on different records, then they start to sound a bit more cohesive, either due to your production style or technique. Does Does that answer your question? Cool.
Thanks, Dani. Anybody else?
Matthew.
How do you approach like the music video for Bloodthirsty? Like, how did that come about?
The animation?
Yeah.
That is actually made by a fellow Armagh woman, Andrea Shine. I nearly forgot her name. I'm also just cautious of time because I also know I need to sing for you, and that always takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I was running a folklore project, basically, on like, what was it? Who knows? I was running it as part of my job at the time. And Andrea was on the project, and she was like, it was the myths and legends of the locality, and it was during lockdown, so it was a very, like, you know, everything was on Zoom. And Andrea just happened to join the course and be an animator, and she was like, if you ever want anything for your tracks, and I was like, that would be great. And that's how it happened, you know. So it's just those connections. You can't plan for those kinds of things, and it's just being open to all of that, and also being open to being that for other people too. Like if someone's like, oh, I need help to get this project off the ground, or can you give me a half a day, and be like, yeah, I can, or be strict with the boundaries and be like, I can't give you any more than half a day, but I can certainly give you 5 hours of my time to work on this, what you need. And that for me is way better than any currency, you know. Yeah. Cool.
Fabulous. Well, I think shall we just draw a line to give you a chance to rest and
To have a wee sleep and a cry.
A wee sleep. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not a cry.
Yeah.
I just on behalf of everybody here, I just really want to thank you for your sharing, your generosity, and your insight into what's going on. Some great words of wisdom there, and I'm really excited to hear you perform later on.
Yeah.
So let's say a big thank you to Dani. Thank you. For those listening, be sure to check out Dani's latest work on streaming platforms and follow her on socials. We'll have links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow. Join us again on Frequency Finder, the SRC Music Podcast, for more conversations with the artists, producers and industry voices shaping the Northern Ireland music scene. See you next time. You've been listening to a Factory 61 produced podcast.